All right, welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by Owen Good of Polygon. You guys know that I'm a big gamer, and so I'm very excited to talk gaming for this end of the 2015 podcast. And Owen is one of my favorite people, so I'm doubly happy to have one of my favorites on for today's show. So, Owen, thanks again for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, Sharona. Always glad to talk about video games. Always glad to put finishing touches on an interesting year in games and anything else you want to talk about.
Well, so much to talk about. W'll go ahead and jump right in and get started, and then at the end I'll let you give a shout-out, excuse me, to some of the, we'll be talking about some of the things that you've been writing about, and we'll start with the best sports video games of the year. Very interesting article. I know that you write a lot about sports video games, and I tweeted out the article. I'm very interested to get your thoughts on the new golf game. I played Tiger Woods, but I haven't played the Rory McIlroy. I hope I said that correctly. But anyway, so let me ask you this. Let's start with this. What criteria do you look at when you start to evaluate not just sports video games? We're going to talk about sports video games, but when you start to evaluate games, what is your criteria that you look at?
Well, I mean, it can be all sorts of things, but I think with video gaming where it is, and it's not just that, the games have cost $6 for 10 years, and that price point I don't think ever is going to move. It's just that publishers are starting to try to sell all sorts of stuff on top of that because obviously, like any business, they have to grow their business. But there's also, increasing costs to participation in the form of the hardware. The new console stuff. There's also, people subscribe to either Xbox Live, PlayStation Plus. So you get value off of that. So I tend to look a little bit more at value. That's just I guess is if I'm making a recommendation to a friend about something. Hey, is this going to be worth it? Is this worth my time? That sort of thing. From a critical standpoint, if I have covered the development of the game and the promises that the studio or the publisher have made about the game or the expectations that people have about the game, particularly with something like Star Wars that commands a lot of attention, I try to look at, okay, well, what did they say they were going to do, and then how close did they come to executing? Or how far above those expectations did they go? I mean, give a mixed bag. I mean, Star Wars Battlefront is a very entertaining game. It's a multiplayer-only experience, but the visuals and the sound design are like way better than anybody expected, for example. So it's like, how do you grade that, relative to the rest of the game, which is it's very straightforward in what you're playing. There's no campaign or story in there. I mean, there kind of is, but it's not as traditional as some of the other games. And so it's just, that's the roadmap that I follow when I'm judging a video game, because you have all kinds of genres, role-playing games to action games to shooters to sports, and so it's like, okay, how do you grade all of them on the same scale? And so that's how I try to break it down.
Do you ever look at responsiveness to fans, feedback? One of the things, and I think Owen knows this, I'm a big Dragon Age fan, and I wonder how well BioWare is responsive to fan comments, to fan commentary on their games. Do you ever look at that?
I would have to be like I mean, I'm familiar obviously with everything BioWare does, but I'm not, so I'm not I enjoy what they've done, but I would not classify myself as a fan of Mass Effect or Dragon Age just because I have not played them as much as I have other games. There's nothing wrong with them, I just haven't. So if I was a fan of that, then I probably would, grade them on a curve there. And I do think that BioWare is a very attentive development studio, to these sorts of things. I mean, I think it has to be because they've created these very intricate stories and people have deep investments in them. And especially if you're going to create, this far-reaching canon of what's going on in space or what's going on in Ferelden or whatever, people are invited to participate in that in a role-playing sense. Then they do have to listen and be attentive, and I think that they have. I mean, I don't know if you're referring to what happened 3 years ago with Mass Effect 3 and the ending that dissatisfied a lot of people. But they did come back to that with, I guess that remastered DLC, and I mean, I looked on that as just sort of an unfortunate incident all over the place. First of all, that people were disappointed, but secondly, that where is the creative prerogative really,
Sure.
wholly BioWare's? And I felt it was something of a capitulation, but they've been beaten up so much about that. There's no need to chew that over. But I think that if nothing else, that shows their responsiveness and attentiveness, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and in the article, I think one of you mentioned that in the Madden franchise, that in response to some complaints about some of the mechanisms of catching and things like that, the game developer did, try to satisfy some fan complaints about it. And we're going to talk about Mass Effect 4 a little bit later. I still want to focus on the sports stuff. Talk about some of the, I guess I just committed one of the faux pas that people hate about talk about, but that's kind of my thing, I suppose. I want to ask you about some of the games that were mentioned in this article.
Okay.
Madden, of course, is big. The FIFA game, FIFA, however you want to pronounce it. But one of the games that was mentioned in there, I'm particularly intrigued about. It's not yet available for the Xbox, I don't think, but that's Rocket League.
Yeah, it's not yet. It'll be coming sometime in 2016 on Xbox One. Currently only available on PlayStation 4 and PC. And, this is one of those games, for those who haven't played it, it's basically soccer with remote-controlled cars. And it's a delightful game in that, people have taken a very simple concept and creatively applied it. The developer is Psyonix. And it works, and it is such a compact experience that people keep coming back to it, so there's extremely high replay value for it. But I think what people hunger for a lot in the sports video game, genre is they want something that is very fun to play, that doesn't seem impossibly steep to learn or take a lot of outside knowledge about a sport, which some of these simulation games do, but also is very authentic and fulfilling and challenging. So it's not like, if you're bad at basketball or football, that you're obligated to turn the difficulty down to rookie or whatever, and you feel babied or that you're getting a less than, but you're still getting something that, focuses on the fun and, the essential acts of a sport, as opposed to some of the more pointillistic things that simulation sports video games are very good at doing, but sometimes they tend to get lost in the weeds there. And I'm thinking about things like base running in baseball games, which I automate. And I'm thinking about things like, certain pass types in FIFA. And I play a very, basic approach to soccer when I play FIFA, and still have a great time, but I'm always going, is there some little extra component of this that I should be using? Although FIFA did some things this year to really try to open up that to people and make it more understandable. But Rocket League has strong appeal, not only because it's just such a zany game, and it's not comical, but it's just anything could happen, and you see all these wild highlights. It's a very watchable game, too. And that's important today as well, because you see how much people are streaming on Twitch, esports and stuff like that, and Rocket League lends itself very much to that. And you see these crazy goals that go the length of the field, right as time expires. It always helps that there's an explosion after the ball crosses the goal line too.
Yeah.
So that's the appeal of Rocket League is very easy to understand, but that's not to say that Psyonix had a simple job in pulling off what it did.
There were some very strong contenders this year, it sounded like, for Sports Video Game of the Year. Ultimately, you chose the NBA 2K franchise. What about that game put it over the edge from your mat? And MLB, the game is very well received as well.
NBA 2K16 got the nod because of the comprehensive effort put into it and the bewildering variety of things that you can do in it, more so than its simulation counterpart in MLB The Show. And then with Rocket League, its execution and novel concept notwithstanding, even compared to other arcade titles, it's not as deep in what it does. And this was very important. And Sumit Sarkar, my colleague here at Polygon, and I were the ones who were, judging and discussing publicly, the criteria on this. And we came back to NBA 2K16 mainly because, first of all, the suite of online multiplayer that it offers is, it's not just, straight up, I'm going to play the Spurs and somebody else is going to play the Warriors. You have the Pro-Am League, which is a cooperative competitive multiplayer where you run ball with other human beings playing their players, in several different outdoor and indoor basketball arenas. You also have My Park, which is basically, it's a wonderful way to take, pick up basketball culture and put it into a video game. And then you have, some online career modes, online franchises, which are, very difficult to maintain, to even pull off in the first place. And they've done very well with that. The other thing too is, they have, the big thing now, of course, is your single player career mode where you just create one person and take that person through the superstar career. And this year, NBA 2K has had 3 different narratives surrounding this mode of their game for the past 3 years, and the latest one was done by Spike Lee. And, some of the story is a little easy. I mean, I've joked that in some places it looks like an after-school special. But it's still, I mean, not to damn things with faint praise or to have low expectations, but they're still the only ones doing it.
Oh yeah.
The only time we've seen really anything like that in a sports video game before was Fight Night Champion, which is a boxing game, and that's something completely different, and that was 4 years ago, 2011. So the other thing too was, Sumit and I really try to be consistent in our criticisms, and it's not just over the course of the year, but it's over all time. And last year, NBA 2K had so many problems again at launch with its online offerings. And I said, if they got that right, this would be the sports game of the year, no questions asked. Well, they got it right, and they did everything else well. And we just felt like there was a very justifiable and defensible case for NBA 2K16 to be the sports video game of the year, our delight with Rocket League notwithstanding, and our appreciation of Psyonix for, doing something different, because this is a very rigid genre. There's not a lot of competition in it, and there's not a lot of new things being done.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. There was a very interesting statement, very true statement in this article, and it said, it was talking about how the landscape has shrunk. Why do you think that is?
Development costs, for starters, which I'll get into in a second, but also licensing costs never go down. And, I
think they're going to go up. I think licensing costs are going to go up.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because it's a ladder kind of thing. It's like, this is, why would a players union ever lower its expectation or its annual minimums? Because they're the only ones in town. And, and I can remember, talking to executives in this space, years ago, and they were sort of smirking about their colleagues who maybe would do like a licensed adaptation of a movie. This was back when that was really big. And they were like, I can guarantee you that person's costs are nowhere near what I pay. And they're right. So it's not just the licensing, there's also the development, because it's as you create, greater expectations and fulfill them, those things only go up. And so it's, in the old days, 20 years ago, it was like, well, if they just had, Pat Summerall and John Madden saying a few lines of digitized dialogue, I mean, that was great. Wow, we've never seen that before. But now we've got Jim Nantz and Phil Simms, and, golly, guys, they're repeating themselves, and it's not very lifelike, and you really need to work on that. And that's a lot of money, because they got to pay Jim Nantz and Phil Simms, and then they got to do all the audio, and then they have to figure out a sensible way to integrate that. So, the services that sports video gamers expect cost a lot to render, especially if it's only a $60 base product. And there are a lot of publishers who have just said, the heck with it, we haven't made enough money on it. I mean, 2K Sports notably just said no on Major League Baseball, didn't renew, and nobody has picked that back up because they can't make enough money, if they can make any money at all, out of what Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association would expect. And publishers are happy to go, okay, fine, there will be nothing of this on the Xbox.
Right.
We'll go do UFC, for example, where the costs and the licensing and the margins are a lot more advantageous.
licensing is going to be so huge, and this, of course, this is my opinion, and I hope that you'll come back, and time's not going to allow us to discuss this in any great detail, but with the popularity of esports, the licensing issue is going to be the big issue, in my opinion, in the future, in not just 2016, but in the next few years, because I think we're on the cusp of a big revolution in esports and in gaming, and it's going to be exciting to watch. I want to ask you about Twitch before we get out of here, but before we even get to that, there's so much I want to talk to you about. This is the thing. I get with Owen, I'm like, I want to ask him about this, I want to ask him about this, but you wrote an article, and we touched upon this earlier. Mass Effect 4, they just lost one of their prime developers. What do you think that means for it was supposed to launch, I believe, in 2016.
Yeah, it's on target for a holiday launch in 2016, and it's an interesting development. We put it out there because people have a lot of interest in that, and it's Mass Effect Andromeda, by the way.
Yes, I'm sorry.
BioWare's been very specific about it because the Shepard storyline Commander Shepard storyline is over. But anyway,
that was a terrible decision, by the way. Let me just go on record. Terrible decision. Okay.
Okay. Well, but as far as the person who left, he was a top developer on the team, and he's gone on, to other things, and this sort of thing happens a lot. I wouldn't read anything into it like this project is in trouble or it's going to get delayed. It's still on target for a holiday 2016 release that's a year away. They've got plenty of time to finish this up. They've been working on it for a very long time. If he's leaving at this point, they've probably got what they want to do with it, baked, and now they're implementing it to get it to an alpha. But people take a great interest in this because it was a groundbreaking series, especially coming in when it did on the last console generation, and they've done a lot of work to create the story that a lot of people feel care very deeply for. But I wouldn't read anything into this that it's in trouble. It's one person.
Okay, so you think that it's probably in the testing stage, and they're way past the stuff that he would have been primarily responsible for.
I really would be talking out of class about this. I don't know where it is.
All right.
Stage. But I would think that a year in or a year from release, they've definitely gotten the big picture stuff done.
Right. I
think that's reasonable to expect.
Yeah. No, you're right. Mass Effect, it was a groundbreaking game. It's a great game. If you're listening and you haven't ever played it, I cannot recommend it more highly. And the criticism about the ending of Mass Effect 3 is definitely warranted. They did the best they could, I suppose, to clean that up. It still pretty much sucks, in my opinion. I want to ask you about Fallout 4. I know that you've been playing it because I see you online playing it, and I know that it's a very, very, very well-received game. I'm not a huge fan of the series. Owen knows this because we've talked about it. I dislike that so strongly, and I don't use it. But I understand that this is a great game. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, Fallout 4 is probably the game that I've spent the most time with, especially of the holiday releases, and there have been some great releases. It is a shame that Rise of the Tomb Raider came out when it did, because I think that's a fantastic game, and I can't say it's overshadowed necessarily because it has gotten a lot of publicity, but it's butting right up against Fallout and Battlefront, and those are just two huge time drains for people who playing both. I enjoy Fallout. I think Fallout 4 is very much, frankly, like the Star Wars movie that just launched, which is it's something that something that people want to spend a lot of time with, and I think that the big picture on the whole, everybody is happy with it and satisfied with it, and it fulfills their expectations of the world that they're exploring. But it's also something where the more time you spend with something, the more things that you can find to nitpick about it. And I have my own pet peeves with it too. There are some things that kind of drive me crazy, but on the whole, it's something it tickles my fancy in sort of the weird time-shifted alternate reality it's in, and the set design that you have, and then the overall mission. And in Fallout 4, I guess I can say this without spoiling anything. You're playing someone who is looking for, let's say, a family member who was taken from you, and I play as a woman because because that just I had one role and I was playing as a man, and I'm thinking I'm just not feeling the character motivation here. I wonder if I switched my gender if I would, and then I did, and I was like, oh, okay, well now this is a lot different. So it's an intriguing story in that regard that can be made more intriguing depending on how you approach it. And I really enjoy the customization and the sense of resourcefulness that you have that comes from crafting weapons and modifying them and using that to become more powerful, as opposed to, okay, well, I've increased another level, now I can put into this many skill points or whatever, and that's what makes me powerful. This is sort of a little, everything is available to you, now how do you go get it? I mean, not truly that, but a little like that.
The best RPGs are like that, where you can craft and you can customize and do the things that you were talking about. It's interesting because if you do play a lot of RPGs, and as I do, and I play as a woman and as a man, I'll switch back and forth, and my game style does change depending on class, depending on what kind of class you play as well, or race or what have you. There are all kinds of different ways that you can customize. I'm very excited. I'm going to try Fallout 4. I'm very excited about that. I want to, before we talk about Twitch and streaming and that topic, I want to ask you about looking ahead to 2016. We already touched upon Mass Effect 4. What are the other hot new games that gamers should be looking for?
Well, let's see. I mean, with the things that come to mind next year, we're going to have XCOM 2, which is going to be a PC game, but has an incredibly devoted following. This is a strategy game in which you defend Earth from, in this case, an alien occupying force. But Deus Ex: Mankind Divided will be a very big role-playing game coming from Square Enix. And I forget exactly when that launch date is, but that is going to be next year, and a lot of eyeballs on that. Uncharted 4, which is interesting because it's going to wrap up the tale of the main protagonist in a fourth game as opposed to a standard trilogy. And No Man's Sky, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about and are wondering when are we going to actually get a launch date on this. That is the space exploration game, which is sort of like from the surface of the planet into outer space, and what you can explore and do, and you can fly around a space fighter, you can engage in ground combat, you can discover strange worlds and their inhabitants, and there's something like 749 quintillion worlds that you can explore or whatever. So it's something that has boasted a very large scale, and I think people are like, well, let's see a lot more about this because we're really interested, because it tickled everyone's fancy when it was announced 2 years ago, 2013, and I think people are really itching to see what Hello Games has coming there.
Interesting. Are you hearing any buzz at all whatsoever? I know BioWare is still pretty tied into the Elder Scrolls Online, or are you hearing any buzz at all about a successor to Skyrim in Oblivion?
Well, I think you mean Bethesda, not BioWare. But,
I'm sorry. Yes, I did.
No, but I've not heard anything out of Bethesda Game Studios about an Elder Scrolls 6. It's not to say. I mean, I think we can assume that something is going to happen there soon. But I think for now, Bethesda and its parent ZeniMax are happy to be using the Elder Scrolls Online as back. I mean, they have their hands full with that, and they just launched Fallout 4. And furthermore, there's going to be downloadable content extensions for Fallout 4 that they are going to be working on there. If you look at what happened the last time, Fallout 3 came out in 2008, and Skyrim came out in 2011. So that was a 3-year window. Yeah. But the other interesting thing about this, and probably why we haven't heard anything, is that Bethesda wanted to have like a very short hype period on Fallout. They didn't want people to be reading about this game for a year, and they also didn't want to announce this game so far out that they ran into something and then had to delay it, because that's just, that kills enthusiasm like crazy. So what you might see because they were very successful with that approach with Fallout 4, you may see that with Skyrim, such that we don't know about that thing coming out until 6 months before it's going to launch. And I would mean, Elder Scrolls 6, whichever part of Tamriel they're going to put that in. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I agree. I think they've got their hands full with the Elder Scrolls Online, and of course, there's always all the other titles that they're working on as well. What about the Fable?
Yeah, they've got Doom coming out. I mean, that's that's id, but that is a ZeniMax product, and so they don't want to confuse their fans, and they also don't want to pack these things too close together.
What about the Fable series? Are you hearing anything about a successor to Fable 3?
I don't. I'll be honest. I don't really follow it that much, except to just form the impression of like what happened to it.
Right. Yeah.
Because for the longest time, this is one of those platform selling series that Microsoft is really pushing, and now it's sort of. I mean, there's some kind of a free to play release on this right now. I mean, it seems to have. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's sort of where it is there. So I don't really know what's going on, if anything, with Fable.
Yeah. It is rather curious. Want to wrap up. I have joined the Twitch revolution for Christmas. I got to connect. Unfortunately, I do not have a controller that will work with the headset that I got, so my twitching days, I guess, are going to have to be pushed off to 2016. What do you think about Twitch and the streaming aspect of gaming? It's becoming so big.
Well, it is. I mean, it's big in that it's a form of social media, because it's a form of self-expression. You show people, this is how I play this game. I mean, and you can stream anything. It's not just, whether it's League of Legends or Dota 2. This is, hey, watch me play Fallout. This is how I'm going to build up my base. And so that's where you see sort of the personal expression. And I get the popularity there, even if I don't get why some things are watchable. But I'll tell you this: I was in an online Madden league, and we had everybody except me was playing one night, and because I was in a bye, and it was like watching Red Zone on NFL Network, because I had all of my friends' streams up, and I was seeing what was going on in their game. And it was, I was pretending I was Andrew Siciliano, and we're going to go down to Detroit because they're on the 15th. So there is, a real sense of humor to it, but also a real appeal there. I think it's only going to get bigger. And I think going back to something you said earlier about Twitch and licensing is interesting to me, in that as this gets bigger and there is more money to be made on it, yes, what will happen? Will leagues and their players' associations, if sports games are streamed, will they demand a cut of that?
Yes, they will. There's no question.
And how? Yeah.
Yes. So, that's the big question.
Yeah. So, but yes, it's here to stay, and a huge component of video gaming, not only for the entertainment, but as I said, for the self-expression.
Yeah. Yeah. Owen knows this. I write about esports a lot. I haven't written lately, simply because I've got a lot of things going on. Esports is, and I said this, with the big thing right now. Some of the things in development right now are in virtual reality, and what we're going to see, I think, is a melding and a meshing. Because football, in particular, sports, it's under attack because of the violent nature and the injuries and all of that. And, I could definitely see, you watching your favorite athlete playing in an online virtual reality version of what they do, physically on the field in the very near future. 10 years from now, it'll be interesting to see how we consume our sports.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I think the NFL has got a reckoning coming to it. I don't want to future cast that too much, because I look at it and there's still a huge segment of the population that has no problem with these guys destroying their brains, and it's incredibly popular still. So, but I agree. You know, in the future, it may just be for a safety aspect of it. You know, Madden is always an anodyne game. You know, you never have to worry about, you know, guys getting CTE in Madden because they're just lines of code.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff. Oh, and it's always such a pleasure. Thanks again. Tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media and find your work.
Yes, I'm on Twitter, Owen Good, and at Polygon, it's just polygon.com. You can find me there. I work weekends. You can definitely find me there. My column and the sports stuff that we write is filed under roster file. So if it was polygon.com/roster file, you can see us there. Thanks very much for having me again.
Thanks for coming on. Have a very happy New Year.
You too. Best to you.
All right. Bye-bye.